My name is June Pecchia. I am a native Californian, San Diego. I have been and still am a teacher, mostly elementary age children. And I've been dealing with cancer for almost 20 years. In March of 2005, when I got the diagnosis of stage 2 breast cancer in my right breast, lobular invasive, I wasn't surprised. I was relieved. I was relieved because I knew that meant I would get to take off from teaching for a while. I love teaching children. I have been doing it since the early 90s, and the children are great. It's the adults that can be problems. And so I had been having trouble for a while. Also, in terms of the medical aspect, previous to the year that they took a second look at my mammogram and I was diagnosed, 2 years previous, they had asked to take a second look. So I know that my cancer had been developing over a period of time, and I'm sure that it was stress related. So when somebody comes to you, to your class, chances are that they've been dealing with stress for a long time. Well, one of the grossest things that people have to put up with, if you see them in initial treatment stages and they're getting the intravenous chemotherapy, and I still have the scar somewhere, I think it's over here, it's called a port. And there's some horrifying things about cancer. It was just felt like this little alien. And that's where they put the poison in. You know, chemo is poison. And so I only had 4 treatments. Thankfully, I did lose my hair. I had instant menopause. I was 48 when I was diagnosed, and I had kind of been having irregular periods, so immediately I had menopause. Hot flashes that were ridiculous. The chemo, the heavy-duty chemo, started to do a number on my brain. And then once I was through with my initial treatments, they advised that I do 5 years of adjunctive therapy, which is pill form chemo. And in my case, it dealt with hormones. And so, God, since age 48, and which has been a long time, I've been having hot flashes, and my brain is not normal. I had also, the fall of 2005, had a mastectomy on my right side. It took fighting. People who are surviving cancer, a lot of them are fighters. I had to fight because they only wanted to do a lumpectomy, and I always knew that if cancer ever came my way, even though it wasn't in my family, that I would get rid of whatever I could. So they did a mastectomy. I had reconstruction, which was problematic, and a lot of people have pain and trouble with their reconstructions. I had a silicone implant that turned rock hard, and I tried twice to get that fixed, and I gave up. I just said, okay, here it is. We'll live with it for 10 years. I tried to go back to teaching, which is my profession that I loved and that supported us, my husband and I, many times. I tried to go back full-time several times. Every time I just was overcome because I couldn't organize anymore, which is critical for an elementary school teacher. You've got all kinds of materials you're responsible for. Finally, several years into the process, had to admit that I had to retire early. Just prior to that, another thing that people face is real financial trauma. I initially was really among the lucky people because I had paid for catastrophic health insurance, and I got 75% of my income for 2 years. Still not so great, but 75% is better than most people. Then it came to 50%, and on top of the 50%, I had to pay $1,100 a month for health insurance for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, which led to bankruptcy, which I didn't want to accept. I wish I had done it earlier. My husband was saying we needed to do it, and I finally just had to be brought to my knees. So they're dealing with financial trauma, emotional trauma, health trauma, pain. 2014, I had tongue cancer, so people end up having multiple cancers. I've had skin cancers that were very painful also. Luckily for me, early diagnosis, and I'm right now clear. Sometimes people have to fight the system. I had to go to the state of California about 2 years ago to get permission to get a preventive mastectomy on my left breast. when I went for another reconstruction after my implant had totally collapsed and needed to be replaced. So people can be fighters. Yoga teachers, please know that we are so, so thankful. You're going to encounter very different levels of ability among your students. And I'm guessing that if you are doing this, that you already probably are an expert yoga teacher. You're just refining your skills. So you may be used to dealing with people who've got their full life force. Oftentimes your yoga cancer survivor students won't have their full life force. They also may not have a clue about how to do the stretches, etc. So for me personally, I really appreciate it when Heidi and Mary will continue to give verbal cues about how to just manipulate yourself a little bit. And also, it's really important that students hear you say, do what you can. I'm sure there are many people, you get in there and you're a fighter because you've been dealing with all this stuff and you want to keep up with everybody else around you. It's important that people not injure themselves or they won't come back. So I'm probably saying to you things that you know. Just do what your heart tells you to do. You already have a good heart if you're doing this. And I just want to thank you and thank Mary and Heidi for carrying on this tradition of offering a donation-based yoga class. It's something that really carries me through and gives me a feeling of connectedness with other people who've suffered similarly.